Hello and welcome. We are here with episode 110 of Riding in the Weeds. We are so stoked that you are here joining us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you are new, I'm Natasha Lucky. I am a business builder and I'm all about helping people get out of the weeds in life, which means every day we come across stuff that we can either move through or we can get stuck in. And that's what we mean by getting stuck in the weeds. There's just stuff that wants to suck you down. And this week we've got a really cool topic. We're going to talk about forever and about the idea in our culture that if it's not forever, then it's a failure. And this is a really cool concept that Jenny came across whilst scrolling through the internet, and I'm going to let Jenny introduce herself and then we'll have a chat about this concept because it's a really good one. I think you guys will enjoy.
Yeah, doom scrolling got me again. I am Jenny Brandon. I'm an animal communicator and energy healer for animals and their people too. If you want to deepen your relationship with your pet and find out a little more about their perspective on life, that is a great reason to connect together.
So everyone needs a friend like Jenny who sends you random
Doom
Instagram
scrolls too
posts.
much? Is that what you're trying to
Yeah,
say?
but your algorithm is so much better than my algorithm. Everyone on my feed needs to write a story about Taylor Swift getting married or whatever other good or bad political or otherwise event that's going on. And this isn't like an algorithm that I've curated. These are people that I have followed for good reasons, and it fascinates me what my actual network is made up of at this point. I'm not sure if I need to do something about it, but it actually helps because I stay away from Facebook during certain periods of time. But back to Jenny and her sending random posts. It's great. So this one that she came across, it really hit home. So I've just come out of running a business, and I remember when I started my mountain bike business and I went to an entrepreneurial training course, and it was all about how to run a successful business and to get the business started. It was a community futures thing here in Canada, and they actually support you with a business plan and funding to get your business running. And one of the people in the room was like, yeah, my plan is to start this business and then I have a 5-year exit plan. And I was offended by the concept. What do you mean? You're going to start this, like you're going to have a baby and then you're going to kick the baby out in 5 years? It made no logical sense because in my mind, I was starting a business and this was going to be my life's work. And I think she had it right, 100%. I spent some time thinking about this and I was like, this person is way more on track than I am, because that's exactly what life is about. It's about creating things and then moving on. It's about being in different places and moving on. I also recently saw something about how in 5 years' time from now, most of the people you interact with will be strangers. And we spend so much time worrying about the people that we're working with or the people we're interacting with. But in reality, if you're doing life and experiencing life, you're moving, which means we move in and out of friend groups. We move in and out of situations. People come and they live somewhere and then they move on. This person was talking about how sad it was to think when they first read this concept, they were like, that is so sad to think of all the people that I'm making these connections with that in 5 years from now, they'll be strangers in my life. They won't really exist. And then she realized that that gave so much freedom because the one person that will always be there is you, and everything else is just an experience.
Yeah. I think if you were to distill that post down, that really what they were trying to convey is that our culture has the attitude that forever is success. That is the definition of success to our society. And the problem is that's not how life works. We've talked about it before. Nothing blooms forever. And that's basically what it's trying to say, is what our culture's impression is that in order to be successful, you must bloom forever. And that's That's just not how life works. And friendships come and go, relationships come and go, jobs come and go, businesses come and go. And to think that the only measure of that success is that something never ends, it's kind of messed up. I still actually have a relationship with the guy I dated for more than 10 years. We had a long relationship together. We're still friends. We just recognized that we were no longer going in the same direction and we wanted different things. And so we let the relationship go. We probably held on longer than we should have because this idea that forever equals success is so permeated in our psyche. And so, therefore, if it's not forever, it's a failure. And I struggled with that for a long time. But at this point, we have a great relationship now. We don't talk often, but we still do. And if I periodically mention something to someone, like, oh, yeah, I was chatting with my ex, I get looked at like I have two heads because that is so abnormal in our culture. And I don't agree with that. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair. I think it does a disservice to people. And whatever it was that came to a close, that people have an attitude that, like, well, if the book closed, then it's a failure. Well, all books need to come to an end. No book is endless either. That would be really awkward and uncomfortable. And so things need to have closure. They need to have some kind of wrap up. Even trees do not have an unlimited life expectancy. We think of them as being forever because they grow so slowly and mature so slowly. But if you actually go do the research, trees have a lifespan. It's often longer than ours, but some of them don't. Some of the trees' lifespans is only 30 years or so. And so it's natural for them to die. It's normal for them to die and move on. And I think the more we can embody that for ourselves and recognize that and then not make it wrong, the easier life gets to be, the less we get caught in the weeds around it. And the easier it is to allow something to come to completion and look for the next thing that's opening up after that.
I think so much of this comes around this. I was just thinking as you were talking, our society has created rules. Like Taylor Swift gets married, and for some reason, my algorithm is full of these people talking about how this is the right way to date somebody. If you're looking for marriage, then this is how you need to go about it. If the guy hasn't proposed to you within a certain amount of time, the way that Travis Kelsey did, if your partner's not doing this, then you need to move on. Like this generation that we're currently in is so full of other people telling us what to do and other people defining the definition of success or the definition of failure or like how you live your life because of this trickle down from the making thinking for ourselves into a commodity. We're not capable of doing things in a way that works for us because there are rules. And if your relationship doesn't last forever, there are such beautiful, our grandparents, and you see these beautiful couples that are still in a relationship after however many years. But how often do you look at an older couple and just assume that that couple has been together since the war and they've had their children and they're beautifully retired? They might have actually gotten a divorce and remarried and
well, or they're not happy at all and they're in the relationship because that's what you do and you don't do anything else. I've seen plenty of couples who were absolutely miserable together, but the thought of divorce was failure and they couldn't admit that to themselves or to anyone else. And so therefore they're miserable for the rest of their life. That sounds horrible to me. Like I don't ever want that. Yeah.
Work. Yeah, our society has this thing against us having experiences. Because if we experience life, then we're going to grow. The easiest way to control a human being is to get them to go and sit in an office every day for 8 hours a day, do whatever it is they do and don't do, have small, meaningless relationships, drink a lot of alcohol, smoke cigarettes, smoke weed, go to the bar, watch TV, and be really wrapped up in who's winning the football game and not have any ability to think outside the box because you're living by a set of rules that you've been given. And then when you're fed information, like that becomes what your world is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very limiting way of being. But if we're always told that success equals forever, then we'll never experiment, we'll never try things because we're either going to be too afraid that it'll fail, i.e., not work, i.e., end, or that we're too worried to close the books on something that has reached its limit, has reached its capacity to continue. I've seen that several times in my life where I didn't create an ending soon enough. I should have created the ending sooner
Yeah.
rather than dragging it out. But again, I had that societal pressure of, well, that's failure. If you put an end to that, that's failure. And so on one hand, we don't try because we don't want to fail. And on the other hand, we hold on to things longer than we need to because we're afraid of the fact that we'd have to admit that it's failed then. And either way, we're in the weeds because it's not a place that is healthy for us. And we're not growing and learning because of that. We've literally stopped ourselves from being able to make all progress at that point.
So let's just do a little switch around here. I really love this idea of every day recommitting to the things that you have. So in essence, your marriage or your relationship is a day. And every day that you wake up, you look at the person that you're with and you say to yourself, I want to be with you for another day. And I want to be in this job for another day. And it's like you're recommitting on a moment by moment basis to everything in your life. Because, it's beautiful. If you're still friends with the people that you made friends with in high school and you still enjoy being with those people and you still love going out for a ladies' night and you've watched your kids grow up together, and that's beautiful. And when you're choosing to still be in that relationship moment by moment and you're restarting it and you're resetting it over and over again, you're not just in it and holding on to it because to not be in it would be failure. You're actually re-choosing every day to be in that situation. You love your job so much that every day you get up and go to work, you are choosing to spend your day in that way. And by flipping that around, you then get the opportunity to one day wake up and be like, yeah, you know what? Actually, I don't want to choose this today. I want to choose differently. And I'm going to get a new job. I'm going to end this relationship. I'm going to move to a different country. One of the most interesting things that I found, I was talking to this guy and him and his girlfriend were in Roslyn. They had a 2-year Canadian visa and they'd been there for 6 months. And they were like, we're going to go back to Scotland. And everybody was like, why would you do that? You could be here for longer. You could immigrate here. You could stay in Roslyn forever. And they were like, because we want to go back to Scotland and we've got this dream that we want to start, and we've decided that we actually don't want to wait any longer and we would rather be there growing that than stay here. This has been amazing, but we're done. And everyone around them was like, how could you not want to stay here forever? And I used to joke that Roslyn was like Storybrooke. There was this TV show, Once Upon a Time, I think it was called. And it was about this town that was like a storybook. And there were all these different characters out of a whole lot of different storybooks. And if you left the perimeter of the town, you forgot that the town existed. And it was the coolest story. I was like, this is Roslyn. It's like a magical fairyland that is so great to be in. But everyone's terrified of leaving because they'll forget themselves. And they think that by not being here, they're not going to be the person. I can't go mountain biking every day. I don't go snowboarding every day. So am I still Natasha? I'm not actually sure. But maybe I want to find out.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not either, because you're choosing every day to do whatever it is that's lighting you up. Instead of going back to last week's episode, instead of choosing to stay because you're afraid of what it looks like to leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
Choosing to keep that business open because you're scared of what it means to close the business down. Totally been there. I ask myself all the time, am I still happy in my relationship? Is this still a relationship I want to be in? And so far the answer has been yes. One day it might be no.
Yeah.
And that's not going to mean that the last 30 years of my life is a failure or waste. It'll just mean that the chapter is closed and it's time to do something different.
Yeah. I think that what this really speaks to on a deep level is our discomfort with death in our culture and our society. We have an extreme discomfort with death, and that is something to our detriment, I think. But it spills over into relationships, it spills over into business ventures and other parts of our life that should have closure and should change over time. And I like what you're saying about recommitting on a daily basis. And the only thing that I would say is that somehow you do have to reconcile that every day is not going to be sunshine and rainbows. And so finding a way to really assess, like, okay, today's not a great day. Do I still want to be here, or do I not want to be here because today's just not a great day? I had a friend who's retired now from his job, and when he was getting close to retirement time, we were like, oh, so do you have a date picked out yet? And he was like, TBD. And everyone knows that TBD, the usual response to that is to be determined. And I was like, oh, okay, because I thought, all right, well, he's leaving it open. But then he followed it up immediately after that with 2 bad days. And I started laughing because I was like, aha. So he had a plan mapped out better than that. But his joke was that as soon as it got bad, he was done. And I was like, that's hilarious that he's at a point where he could say that. He was at the point with his job where he could completely retire, and he'd work super hard to make sure that he was able to continue to sustain his lifestyle. And I have mad respect for him for that. But yeah, I was like, oh, that is hilarious that he was just waiting for things to shift to a point where he did not want to do that anymore. And that was perfectly acceptable as closure at that point. But retirement is one of the few aspects of life where we have permission to close the book, or we have permission to decide this is the end of this book of my life. And somehow that doesn't carry over into so many other places. And the only way to even be successful at that is if you had a career. If you were with that company for, which he happened to be, for his entire career. But that doesn't even happen that way anymore in our world. The time where that was normal to be able to start with a company at the bottom and work your way through that company and be supported by that company until retirement, those days are gone. That doesn't exist the way that used to 20, 30 plus years ago. And so we have to find a new way to be able to write the book and then close the book when we're done. And there's no failure in that at all. The only way to not succeed is just to allow yourself to be bogged down in the weeds and get stuck.
I think it's really interesting because retirement has been, it's like your reward at the end. It's like graduation. Like you've now sat in this room and you graduate, and then the next step is that you're going into a new form of school, which is now called a job, and you get to do that for 50 years, and then you get to graduate at the end of it. And it's like the carrot on the end of the stick. And there's this terror that, well, I haven't done everything I need to do in order to be able to retire, so I'm never going to be able to retire. And the new kind of philosophy is that, just like you say, you want a life that you don't need to have a vacation from. What if you have a purpose that you don't ever want to retire from? You look at Bob Proctor and you look at these people that are still out there, even though they have more than enough money. They don't need to be doing what they're doing. My dad works so ridiculously hard for this living values organization because of what he believes in. And he's 80 something, and he spends his whole time working so hard for this organization. He doesn't need to be, he makes no money from it. He works so hard because it's something he believes in. And he's like, my brain is always coming up with ideas. My brain wants to do all this stuff. And it brings him joy.
Yeah.
And that's what's important. And it's not attached to anything. It's not attached to his purpose. It's not attached to being liked. It's not attached to needing anything. It's just doing it for the joy of doing it. And what if our whole entire lives could be based around that sort of concept? That, as you say, 2 bad days, well, I'm going to go and do something else.
Yeah.
I don't want to be here anymore. You
Yeah.
know, and when I talk about, like, situation is frustrating me. Well, you've only got another week and everything's going to be done. Yeah, that's true. But what I really want to make sure is I don't take this with me, because this is just another iteration of the same thing. So at the same time, how can we also think about things as lessons? So, that idea that when you leave a relationship for reasons that you're like, this isn't working for me anymore, I'm going to leave this relationship and that'll solve all these problems. Well, the chances are you're just going to go into another relationship with the same problems. So there's this requirement to grow and to continue to grow. And the reason why you're changing your situation is not to try and get away from something. Again, back to that idea. We're not trying to fix what's uncomfortable by quitting, but we're actually growing by leaving something that's no longer serving us.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is that I have noticed that sometimes when you're in something, this could be a job, a relationship, a location, a house, whatever, that when you get the lesson, when you really find the value in it and you evolve and grow, it's time to move on. It is time to go somewhere else at that point. And if we don't allow ourselves to do that, then we hamper our future growth by holding on to what we had in the now. And I see this with animals because when they figure something out, when they learn something, they move on. You see it in the recovery of pets who have dealt with abuse before, that once you really get through that, they don't go back to the way they were. There may be things that trigger stuff occasionally, but the reaction should get smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's how you know that they're really working through that past chapter of their life and the book is closed. The book is done and they're not in that situation anymore. And I think when we can look at our own evolution that way and say, okay, yeah, I have done what I came here to do. I've evolved the way I wanted to evolve and I'm ready for something new. You can only move into something new when you allow the old to fall away in whatever way that looks like. Otherwise, like I said, you're just sitting in the weeds at that point. And you aren't going to find your way out of them until you're willing to let go of what was and step into something new. Sometimes that limbo period in the middle can be pretty uncomfortable and it can take a while. But you really have to be at the point where you're prepared for the old to be completely gone in order for the new to come in. Because oftentimes you won't be able to move through that until that sort of internal decision has been made.
Yeah. It's interesting as we're talking and my beautiful little puppy dog sitting next to me, and I was thinking to myself, I think that's something that our pets really do give us an opportunity to visit with ourselves. We have these incredible creatures in our lives and they give us so much. And you see these little reminders that are like, if when your dog wants to go for a walk, go for a walk with your dog, because they're not going to be here forever. This is a limited time offer. And that is so hard to even cope with, right? Like the coping strategy for me was like, okay, well, it's a short term commitment. And then when I moved into my short term commitment, I was like, no,
Yeah.
I can't handle this. And just the desire to wipe all of the photos of my cat out of my phone sometimes, because every time I see a picture of us adventuring with the cat, my heart breaks into 100 pieces. And I think being okay with the grief and being okay with the endings, again, coming back to that idea that death just scares us so much, the letting go of something is so hard for us because it hurts. And it might not even be about failure. It's about the fact that we have not been conditioned to let go.
Yeah.
And this desire to just hold on. And I think that's part of our biology as human beings. And like we are conditioned to survive through whatever hardship. When the zombies come, why would you want to live through the zombie apocalypse? Oh, like, take me out. I don't want to be part of this. But our human conditioning is that we want to survive at all costs.
Yeah. Well, and my thought on that is that Mother Nature always wants to grow. I mean, look at the number of weeds that'll come up in the cracks of concrete, which is like the worst environment for them to be able to grow in. And yet they still fight to grow. And they will grow to the best of their ability in the strangest places, even though that is not really the ideal environment for them. So Mother Nature always wants to survive and thrive. But culturally, you look back 100 years ago, you look to some of the indigenous cultures in the North American continent, as well as around the world, they had a completely different relationship with death. And they knew that death was not the end. They believed that there was something after death. And I personally believe that our souls are eternal. That's just what I view as the way it works. And so just because we encounter death doesn't mean that our soul stops existing, our physical body stops existing. But the issue is that over the years, we've prolonged lives. We've been able to figure out advances in health and medicine that have helped people survive in conditions and places that they never would have before. And as a result, we have become very uncomfortable with the idea of death. And I would love to see that change because I think it would free up a lot of energy that gets stuck holding on to things and gripping something so tightly, even as far as our pet relationships. I see it with pet owners all the time, that absolute complete terror over losing their animal. And I can't say I'm immune to that because I'm not. This is one of the beautiful parts about having relationships with horses, but it's also one of the most challenging. I've owned my horse since he was 6. He's 23. Yeah. That's a long time to have a relationship with an animal. And it is very, very hard for me to think about life without him. And I know I have far fewer days left than I've had with him. And that scares me. But it's inevitable. And it's inevitable with all of the people that we're around. We may outlast some of them, and some of them will outlast us. And figuring out how to be comfortable with that concept, I think that frees up the energy to be able to move through and focus on the good stuff and the ease and the freedom and the flow and the fun that's available to us at all times, rather than worrying about when is the end going to happen and what does that mean about me as a person, about my life, about my success, and about all of those things. If we can just find the fun and the joy in the moment and allow things to die off when their life has completed, in whatever way that looks, whether that's a job or a relationship or another being, it's freedom is what it really is. It frees up so much energy to be able to be here and now in a much more authentic and grounded way.
It's a very freeing way to think, oh, I should go for a walk with the dog. I should spend time with my partner. I should turn off the TV and do something else and not be sitting procrastinating and doom scrolling and avoiding life and avoiding being with the people right now that you have the opportunity to be with, because in 5 years they might be strangers. To have had that relationship and to have had that enjoyment. And when I think about this very short season that we've been at the campground, to start with, you know, me and the other girl that works here, I so needed the friendship that we had at the beginning of the season. Someone to talk to, just somebody else other than Ian, because I hadn't had that physical friendship, and it felt so good. And it lasted a month or so, and then it shifted. And it didn't need to be a lifelong friendship that I made in a 4-month summer stint. It needed to be what was there in the moment for me. And that's what it was. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And then, you know, things shift from moment to moment. And if we can be in the moment, then when things shift, we're not left feeling like we failed, because we lived every second of it.
Yeah. I love that.
And every part of it was an adventure and reminding ourselves. And then being able to look back and be like, wow, look at what that gave me. And then when it was done, it was done. I've always said, I remember when I left my golf cart, beverage cart job, it was such a fun job. I had to drive around the golf course and give out beer. I got paid good money. I got good tips. It was fun. I got to be in the sunshine all day. It was incredible. I did it for several summers and it was so much fun. And I always said to myself, when this stops being fun and becomes a job, I need to go and do something else, because it's not fair for me to not be enjoying this position when somebody else could come in and do this job and be loving it like I am right now. It would be an injustice to the next person, because now I'm holding space and hating it when somebody else isn't getting an opportunity to love it. And I think that that's true in every position, everything that we do in life. There is somebody, there's jobs that you're like, oh my God, there's no way I could ever do that job. How does that person get up every morning and do this job? And there are people doing those jobs that are just like, this is the best day of my life. I could not imagine doing or being anybody else right now. And if we can be in a space where we stop taking up space in places where we no longer belong, we make room for other people to find the places where they belong.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's perfect.
And yeah, one more piece of that would be that relationship you were in that you left because it didn't work for you, and then that person finds their perfect person and live happily ever after. And if you'd continued to be in that relationship, neither one of you would have been happy, and neither one of you would have actually been able to find exactly, because yeah, not everything is always right for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I think that pretty much wraps up. And nothing's forever. And just because something isn't forever does not mean it's a failure. Frankly, at that point, I would say it's even more of a success if you allow it to have the closure that it deserves and that you deserve, so that you can continue to move on in your life and you don't live in the weeds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. This has been a good one. I like this topic.
I do. I agree. I like this topic too. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, random Instagram post.
Thanks to doom scrolling.
Yay.
That's the hard part about it, is that sometimes you find these beautiful gems among the doom, and you know, it's worth it, which is exactly what keeps us hooked on it. So There we are.
Absolutely. Well, it was funny too because, like, Jenny, this is like for those of you that are still hanging on with us here. Jenny was like, well, it's interesting because it was a bunch of slides and they were all very random. And then it was at the end of the slides that this little piece of wisdom was popped. And so then I had to scroll back and look at the other slides, and oh, they were absolutely hilarious. And my favorite one was the idea of these people that when they get home, they tap into the home speaker and they play an intro song. So when they're arriving home from work, they
It's like
put on an
Rocky
intro
or
song.
something. I don't know. Yeah, it's hilarious. Yeah, there were all these funny slides. And the last two were this truth bomb of the fact that endings do not equal failure. And I'm like, what the heck? This is not at all what I expected out of the fun little group of slides to have this big old truth bomb at the end. I was like, no, heck.
It's like save the best for last.
Right?
All right, so I am Natasha Lucky. I am a business builder. I am here to help you really see where you're stuck in the weeds and help you with your tech so that you can get more clients, you can build your website and create strategies that allow you to manage things on your own or continue to get support, whatever it is you need. And if you've got an online course idea or you have an online course that just needs to be put into a better structure, I can help you with that too. So you can find me meetwithtash.com. That's the link to connect with me. So go there. I'm also on Instagram at Betty Gohard, and you can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn, Natasha Lockie, and Substack, Writing in the Weeds, and Natasha Lockie.
Awesome. I am Jenny Brandon. I'm an animal communicator and energy healer for animals and their people too. If you are finding yourself stuck in your pet relationships, that would be a great reason to have a session together so we can find out a little bit more about life from your pet's perspective and get both of you back on the same page so that you can have a more harmonious relationship together in whatever phase of your life you are in. You can find me on the web at soulpetconnections.com and on Substack, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under the same handle. So thank you so much for joining us here today. You can find the podcast on Substack as well as all the major podcast platforms. Please drop a like or comment or share if you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week, and thanks for joining us.